First Contact and the Challenge. The Zythrak had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist for over 5,000 years. They were creatures born for war, standing nearly 10 feet tall with thick, scaled skin that could deflect most energy weapons. Their forearms ended in razor-sharp talons capable of tearing through starship hull plating. Their eyes, a deep crimson color, could see across multiple light spectrums, making them nearly impossible to ambush. Every sentient species across 42 star systems knew their name and trembled at the mere mention of it. The Zythrak Empire had conquered 93 worlds. They had enslaved countless billions of beings, forcing them to mine resources, build weapons, and serve their endless war machine. No species had ever successfully resisted them. No military force had ever pushed them back. They were considered the apex predators of known space, and they had earned that reputation through countless centuries of brutal, efficient conquest. War Master Krell stood on the command deck of the dreadnought Eternal Darkness, gazing out at the stars with eyes that had witnessed the fall of empires. He was ancient by Zythrak standards, nearly 600 years old, and he had personally led the conquest of 27 worlds. His scaled armor bore the marks of 1,000 battles, each scar a testament to his survival and dominance. Behind him, his crew of 300 warriors worked in perfect silence, monitoring systems and preparing weapons. They were approaching a new target, a small blue planet on the outer edge of an unremarkable star system. The planet was called Earth, and its dominant species called themselves humans. Krell's scouts had been observing them for 3 months, analyzing their technology, their military capabilities, and their social structures. The reports were almost amusing. These humans had barely begun to explore their own solar system. Their weapons were primitive chemical projectiles and early energy systems. Their ships could barely reach their own moon with any consistency. They spent most of their energy fighting amongst themselves over meaningless scraps of land and resources. It would be the easiest conquest in Zythrak history. Krell expected the entire operation to take less than 1 planetary rotation. The humans would see his fleet, understand the futility of resistance, and surrender. Then the mining operations would begin, the humans would be processed into the labor force, and the Zythrak Empire would expand once more. It was a story that had played out dozens of times before. This time would be no different. Captain Elena Rodriguez was having the worst day of her life, and it was about to get much worse. She had been flying patrol missions for the United Earth Space Defense Force for 7 years, and in all that time, the most exciting thing she had encountered was a malfunctioning communications satellite. Her small patrol craft, the Spirit of Brasilia, was performing a routine sweep near Mars when her sensor board suddenly lit up like a festival fireworks display. Elena was 42 years old, a veteran of the resource wars that had consumed Earth's nations 2 decades earlier. She had grown up in Sao Paulo, watching her city burn during the water conflicts. She had joined the military because she believed in protecting people, in standing between innocent lives and those who would harm them. She had never imagined she would need to protect the entire human species. The sensors were showing 47 ships. Massive ships. Ships that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. They had appeared from nowhere, their arrival creating ripples in spacetime that her instruments could barely measure. Elena's hands moved automatically, running diagnostics, checking for system errors, hoping desperately that this was some kind of malfunction. But the readings remained consistent. 47 ships, each one easily 3 kilometers long, were moving steadily toward Earth at speeds that should have been impossible. Elena opened a communication channel with trembling fingers. Her training told her to follow protocol, to identify herself, to establish peaceful contact. Her instincts told her to run, to warn Earth, to give humanity any advantage she could. She chose protocol, though every nerve in her body screamed at her to flee. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the United Earth Space Defense Force," she transmitted on all frequencies. "Unknown vessels, please identify yourselves and state your intentions. You are approaching protected space. Please respond." For 3 minutes, there was only silence. Elena watched the ships continue their approach, steady and unstoppable. Then her communication system crackled to life. The voice that came through was deep and resonant, speaking English with an accent that sounded like grinding stones. "Small creature," the voice said. "I am War Master Krell of the Zythrak Empire. Your world now belongs to us. You will transmit orders to your leaders. They have 48 of your planetary hours to surrender all weapons, all resources, and all authority. Your species will be integrated into our labor force. Resistance will result in complete extermination. This is your only warning." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. She looked at her scanner, seeing the massive ships still approaching. She thought about her daughter, Maria, who was 12 years old and wanted to be an astronaut. She thought about her mother, who still lived in the ruins of Sao Paulo, tending a small garden and believing the worst days were behind them. She thought about the 8 billion people on Earth who had no idea what was coming. She should have acknowledged the message. She should have transmitted the warning to Earth Command. She should have done exactly what the alien had ordered. Instead, Elena Rodriguez did something that would change the course of history. "You want Earth?" she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Then come and take it." She transmitted Earth's exact coordinates, not as a surrender but as a challenge. Then she added something that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. "We are humanity. We have survived ice ages, plagues, asteroids, and ourselves. We have turned deserts into gardens and poisoned air into breath. We have split the atom and walked on other worlds. We fight. We adapt. We survive. And we do not kneel to anyone." Elena cut the transmission and turned her ship toward Earth at maximum speed. Behind her, on the eternal darkness, War Master Krell stared at his communication system in something resembling surprise. In 5,000 years of conquest, no species had ever responded to his ultimatum with defiance. Most begged for mercy. Some tried to negotiate. A few simply went silent in despair. None had ever issued a counter-challenge. Krell felt something stir in his chest. It might have been anger. It might have been respect. He was not entirely sure. He looked at his second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Thax. "Interesting," Krell said slowly. "Very interesting. Shall we destroy her ship, War Master?" Thax asked. Krell shook his massive head. "No. Let her return to her world. Let her warn them. It will make no difference to the outcome." But deep inside, in a place he rarely acknowledged, Krell felt the smallest seed of doubt. These humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Time would tell which. Elena's ship screamed through space at speeds that made her hull groan in protest. She had already transmitted everything to Earth Command, encrypted burst transmissions containing every sensor reading, every detail of her encounter. By the time she reached Earth's orbital stations, the entire planet was already mobilizing. General Marcus Chen stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from 1,000 sources. He was 60 years old, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much war. He had commanded forces during the resource wars, had made impossible decisions, had sent thousands to their deaths to save millions. He had hoped those days were behind him. He had been wrong. Around the table sat representatives from every major nation on Earth. Old enemies were sitting side by side, their previous conflicts suddenly meaningless in the face of extinction. The president of the American Federation sat next to the premier of the Asian coalition. The European Union's High Chancellor spoke quietly with the African Union's military commander. Borders and politics had become irrelevant in a matter of hours. "We have 48 hours, General Chen said, his voice cutting through the nervous murmurs. 48 hours before an enemy we cannot possibly defeat arrives in orbit. Our combined military forces total approximately 1,200 ships. Most of them are patrol craft and transport vessels. We have maybe 300 ships that were actually designed for combat." He pulled up a hologram of the Zythrak fleet. "Their smallest ship is larger than our biggest battleship. Their shields can withstand anything we have. Their weapons can destroy cities in single shots. A direct military confrontation will last minutes, not hours. Then we surrender," someone said. A European minister, his face pale. "We negotiate. We buy time." General Chen shook his head. "They are not interested in negotiation. They want slaves and resources. That is all." Dr. Amara Okonkwo stood up from her seat. She was 38 years old, a physicist from Lagos who had been working on theoretical weapons research. She was small, with close-cropped hair and eyes that burned with intensity. She had lost her entire family in the resource wars. She had spent the last 15 years making sure it never happened again. "Then we do not fight them directly," she said firmly. "We cannot match their technology, so we do not try. We fight dirty. We fight in ways they have never seen before." General Chen looked at her. "Explain." Dr. Okonkwo pulled up her own display, showing Earth's orbital infrastructure, the asteroid belt, the moon bases, everything humanity had built in space over the last 50 years. "They expect a military response. Ships in formation, weapons firing, shields up. Standard warfare. But we are not a standard military. We are 8 billion desperate people who will do anything to survive." She pointed to the asteroid belt. "We have mining operations here. Thousands of rocks that we have already moved and guided. We turn them into kinetic weapons." She pointed to the satellites. "We have communication networks, power stations, research facilities. We use them as bombs." She pointed to Earth itself. "We have 8 billion people who can build, fight, and sacrifice." "It will not be enough," another voice said. "It does not need to be enough," Dr. Okonkwo replied. It needs to be enough to make them think twice. Enough to show them that conquering us costs more than we are worth. General Chen studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. You have 48 hours. Use them well. Across Earth, humanity began to move. Factories that had built cars and appliances were retooled to build weapons. Scientists who had studied medicine and agriculture turned their knowledge to creating death. Every ship that could fly was armed. Every satellite was reprogrammed. Every person who could hold a weapon received one. In Beijing, engineers worked around the clock to convert industrial rail guns into orbital defense weapons. In Texas, chemists developed new explosives using materials the Zythrak had never encountered. In Mumbai, programmers created viruses designed to infect alien computer systems. In Moscow, strategists developed plans for guerrilla warfare in space. Jackson Rivera, who everyone called Jax, was 26 years old and one of the best fighter pilots humanity had ever produced. He had grown up in Mexico City, learning to fly old aircraft at illegal racing circuits. The military had recruited him 5 years ago, recognizing his natural talent. Now he stood in a hangar bay, looking at his fighter, the Tempest, and trying not to think about the fact that he was probably going to die in the next 2 days. Around him, his squadron was preparing. 12 pilots, 12 fighters, going up against ships that could destroy planets. The odds were impossible. The mission was suicide. None of them had quit. None of them had asked to be reassigned. They knew what was at stake. Jax's co-pilot and best friend, Sarah Kim, walked up beside him. She was 24, brilliant, and terrified, though she hid it well. So, she said quietly, "This is really happening." Jax nodded. "This is really happening. Any words of wisdom?" Jax smiled slightly. "Yeah. Fly fast. Hit hard. Do not get killed." Sarah laughed despite herself. "That is your wisdom?" "That is all I have got." They stood together in silence, watching technicians load their fighters with every weapon humanity could provide. The weapons would probably not even scratch the Zythrak ships, but they would try anyway. Because that was what humans did. They tried. They fought. They refused to accept defeat until defeat was absolute and final. 48 hours, Sarah said. 48 hours, Jax agreed. Above them, the Zythrak fleet was approaching. War Master Krell sat on his command throne, reviewing the data his scouts had gathered. The humans were mobilizing, just as he expected. They were arming ships, moving resources, preparing defenses. It was all futile, but it was predictable. Conquered species always went through these stages: denial, anger, bargaining, and finally acceptance. But something bothered Krell. The human response was not panicked. It was organized. Coordinated. They were not begging for mercy or trying to negotiate. They were preparing for war. Real war. Total war. Thax approached him carefully. "War Master, our intelligence has intercepted human communications. They are not planning to surrender." "Of course not," Krell replied. "Not yet. They will see our power and lose hope." "War Master," Thax said slowly, "with respect, I do not think they will." Krell looked at his second-in-command. "Why?" "Because," Thax said, "they are not acting like any species we have conquered before. They are not afraid. They are angry." Krell considered this. Fear and anger often looked the same before a battle. The difference only became clear afterward, when fear led to surrender and anger led to death. These humans would learn the difference soon enough. The Zythrak fleet crossed into Earth's solar system, their massive ships blotting out stars. Sensors across the system detected them. Alarms sounded in every military base, every space station, every ship. Humanity held its breath. General Chen stood in the war room, watching the displays. 47 ships. Unstoppable force. Impossible odds. "All units," he said calmly into his communicator, "this is General Chen. In approximately 6 hours, the enemy will be in weapons range. We cannot match their technology. We cannot match their firepower. We cannot win a traditional battle. So we will not fight a traditional battle. Remember what we are fighting for. Remember who we are protecting. Remember that we are humanity, and we do not surrender. All units stand ready." Across the solar system, 1,200 human ships moved into position. Not in neat formation. Not in defensive lines. They scattered like seeds in the wind, hiding in asteroid fields, behind moons, in the shadows of planets. They were not an army. They were an ambush. Dr. Okonkwo activated her electromagnetic pulse network, a web of satellites and power stations that could generate a massive energy burst. It would only work once. It had to count. Jax Rivera and his squadron launched from Earth's surface, their small fighters racing toward the stars. They flew in patterns that no computer could predict, random and chaotic, making themselves impossible targets. Elena Rodriguez, the captain who had issued humanity's challenge, stood on the bridge of Earth's largest battleship, the Defiance. It was not impressive by Zythrak standards. It was barely impressive by human standards. But it was ready. She was ready. War Master Krell's fleet approached Earth's moon. He expected to see a defensive fleet. He expected to see weapons charging. He saw nothing. Empty space. Silence. Where are they? Thax asked, confusion in his voice. Krell did not answer. For the first time in his 600 years of life, he felt something he had not felt in centuries. Uncertainty. Then, from every direction, humanity struck. The battle that changed everything. The first strike came from a direction the Zythrak never expected, below. 3 modified mining vessels, loaded with refined uranium cores and stripped of all safety systems, erupted from behind Earth's moon at speeds that should have torn them apart. They were not aiming for direct hits. They were aiming to get close enough. War Master Krell had barely registered the primitive vessels on his sensors when they detonated. The explosions were not nuclear, they were something far more crude and far more effective. Each mining ship carried thousands of tons of metal fragments, debris, and industrial waste, all accelerated to incredible velocities by the explosions. The result was a shotgun blast on a cosmic scale. The Zythrak shields held against the direct impact, but the sheer volume of debris created an instant cloud of destruction around the lead ships. Sensors went blind. Communication arrays were shredded. The elegant formation of the Zythrak fleet broke apart as ships maneuvered desperately to avoid colliding with each other in the suddenly opaque space. Now! General Chen's voice echoed across every human channel. Dr. Amara Okonkwo activated her electromagnetic pulse network. 200 satellites and 15 orbital power stations discharged simultaneously, creating a wave of electromagnetic energy that rippled across the battlefield like an invisible tsunami. The Zythrak shields, designed to deflect physical projectiles and energy weapons, had never been tested against such a primitive, brute-force electromagnetic assault. The shields flickered. For just 3 seconds, they went offline completely. 3 seconds was all humanity needed. From hidden positions throughout the system, human ships opened fire. Not with elegant energy weapons or sophisticated missiles. They fired kinetic rounds, ancient technology elevated to an art form. Depleted uranium slugs the size of cars, accelerated by rail guns to a fraction of light speed. The rounds had been fired minutes earlier, timed perfectly to arrive during those 3 seconds of vulnerability. The first Zythrak cruiser, the Crimson Talon, took 17 direct hits. Its armor, designed to withstand energy weapons, cracked under the sheer kinetic force. Atmosphere vented into space. The ship did not explode dramatically. It simply died, its crew of 400 gasping for air that was no longer there. 2 more Zythrak ships suffered critical damage before their shields came back online. War Master Krell gripped his command throne, his forearms tense with a mixture of rage and something he refused to call fear. Return fire. He roared. Destroy everything. The Zythrak weapons came to life. Energy beams capable of melting mountains lanced through space, but they found few targets. The human ships were not where the Zythrak targeting systems expected them to be. They were not holding position. They were not maintaining formations. They were moving in ways that seemed random, chaotic, unpredictable. Jax Rivera led his squadron of 12 fighters through the battlefield like a swarm of angry hornets. His fighter, the Tempest, twisted and rolled through space in patterns that made his navigation computer scream warnings. Behind him, Sarah Kim matched his every move, her fighter dancing through the void. Target their sensor arrays. Jax commanded. Blind them. The human fighters were too small and too fast for the Zythrak capital ships to track effectively. The massive vessels had been designed to fight other capital ships, not tiny, agile craft that flew like drunken insects. Jax dove toward a Zythrak destroyer, his weapon systems locked on the sensor clusters that studded the ship's hull. He fired everything he had. Missiles, kinetic rounds, even the experimental plasma bursts that Dr. Okonkwo's team had developed just 20 hours ago. His weapons were laughably weak compared to the Zythrak arsenal. But they did not need to destroy the ship. They only needed to destroy its eyes. The sensor array exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. The destroyer went blind, its targeting computers suddenly receiving nothing but static. It fired wildly, its weapons tracking phantoms and hitting empty space. Across the battlefield, 11 other human fighters were doing the same thing. One by one, Zythrak ships lost their ability to see. They became dangerous but blind, lashing out at shadows while the real threats slipped past their defenses. On Earth's surface, Captain Elena Rodriguez was coordinating the ground-based weapons. Massive railguns, originally designed for launching cargo into orbit, had been converted into planetary defense weapons. They could not fire rapidly. They could not maneuver. But they could hit with the force of small meteorites. Target confirmed, her weapons officer reported. Zythrak battleship, designation Alpha 7. Range, 400,000 kilometers. Fire, Elena commanded. The railgun shuddered as it released its payload. A solid tungsten rod, 3 meters long and weighing 12 tons, left Earth's atmosphere at 70 kilometers per second. It took 90 seconds to reach its target. The Zythrak battleship's shields were already weakened from sustained fire. The tungsten rod punched through them like paper and buried itself deep in the ship's engineering section. The ship did not explode immediately. It took almost 30 seconds for the damage to cascade through its systems. When it finally went critical, the explosion was bright enough to be seen from Earth with the naked eye. War Master Krell watched another of his ships die and felt something crack inside him. Not his confidence, not yet. But his certainty. He had conquered 93 worlds. He had faced species with superior technology, species with powerful psychic abilities, species with weapons that could reshape matter itself. He had always won because the Zythrak understood war. They had perfected it over millennia. But these humans did not fight like any species he had ever encountered. They did not follow the rules of warfare. They did not maintain defensive positions or protect supply lines. They attacked from everywhere and nowhere. They used mining equipment as weapons. They turned communication satellites into bombs. They flew their fighters like suicide pilots, taking impossible risks that no sane military would authorize. Thax approached him, his scaled face grim. War Master, we have lost 6 ships. 12 more are severely damaged. The humans are using tactics we have never encountered. They are not trying to win. They are trying to make us bleed. Krell understood then. These humans knew they could not win a conventional battle. So they were not fighting a conventional battle. They were fighting a war of attrition, trying to make conquest so costly that the Zythrak would simply leave. It was a desperate strategy. It was also working. All ships, Krell commanded, fall back to defensive formation. Launch ground assault forces. We will take their planet directly. It was a mistake, and Krell realized it even as he gave the order. But pride would not allow him to retreat. The Zythrak had never retreated. They had never shown weakness. To do so now would shatter 5,000 years of dominance. The Zythrak dropships launched, 300 of them, each carrying 50 warriors. 15,000 of the galaxy's most feared soldiers, descending toward a planet of 8 billion desperate humans. They were met with a storm. Every city on Earth had prepared. Every military base had armed itself. But more than that, every civilian had been mobilized. Factory workers carried rifles. Teachers had explosives. Children as young as 10 were trained to run messages and spot enemy positions. Humanity had not just mobilized its military. It had mobilized its entire civilization. The first Zythrak drop ships landed in the Australian outback, expecting to establish a beachhead far from major population centers. Instead, they found themselves in a killing field. The ground had been seeded with mines. The rocks concealed snipers. The very air was filled with drones, cheap civilian models converted into flying bombs. Zythrak warriors were individually superior to humans in every way. They were stronger, faster, better armored. A single Zythrak could fight 10 humans and win. But they were not fighting 10 humans. They were fighting thousands. In Jakarta, Zythrak forces tried to secure a communications hub. They found themselves fighting through streets where every building was a fortress, every window a sniper position. When they finally took the hub after 6 hours of brutal fighting, the humans detonated the entire structure, killing 200 Zythrak warriors in the collapse. In Sao Paulo, where Elena Rodriguez's daughter Maria was hiding in a shelter with her grandmother, Zythrak forces tried to terrorize the population into submission. They destroyed buildings and executed civilians in public squares. Instead of breaking resistance, it ignited fury. Civilians attacked with whatever they had, kitchen knives, makeshift explosives, even vehicles driven directly into Zythrak formations. General Chen watched the reports flowing into the war room. The casualties were horrific. Thousands of humans were dying every hour. Entire neighborhoods were being leveled. But the Zythrak were dying too. Not in thousands, but in dozens. And for a species that had never lost a war, every death was a shock. Dr. Okonkwo appeared on his screen, her face covered in dust and blood. She was broadcasting from a research facility in Kenya that was under assault. "General," she said, her voice steady despite the explosions in the background, "I need you to do something for me." "Name it," Chen replied. "I need you to authorize the use of the Prometheus Protocol." Chen felt his blood go cold. The Prometheus Protocol was a last resort weapon, something Okonkwo had developed in secret during the resource wars but had never deployed. It was a biological agent, specifically designed to target the Zythrak based on the DNA samples recovered from their ships. It would kill them. All of them. Every Zythrak in the solar system would die within hours. It would also violate every international treaty humanity had ever signed regarding biological warfare. It would make humanity no better than the monsters they were fighting. Amara, Chen said quietly, if we use that, we become exactly what they think we are. Dr. Okonkwo smiled sadly. Marcus, we are already what they think we are. We are killers. We are survivors. We are the species that will do anything to protect our children. The question is not whether we are monsters. The question is whether we are willing to be monsters to protect our future. Stand by, Chen said, and cut the connection. He looked around the war room at the faces of Earth's leaders. They were exhausted, terrified, and determined. He knew what they would say. He knew what the vote would be. But before he could call for it, something unexpected happened. A new signal appeared on their screens. It was coming from deep space, from a region beyond the Zythrak fleet. The encryption was sophisticated, but the message was clear enough. It was not from the Zythrak. It was from someone else. General Chen, an unfamiliar voice said through the speakers. It spoke English with an accent that sounded almost musical. My name is Ambassador Lyran of the Viridian Council. We have been watching your conflict with the Zythrak. We are impressed. We are also terrified. Chen frowned. Explain. The Zythrak have ruled through fear for 5,000 years, Lyran continued. They have enslaved dozens of species because no one dared to fight back. Every species that resisted was crushed so thoroughly that others simply surrendered rather than face annihilation. But you humans, you are showing the galaxy something it has never seen before. You are showing them that the Zythrak can bleed. You are showing them that resistance is possible. That is wonderful, Chen said bitterly, but we are still losing. Perhaps, Lyran replied, but you have already won something more important than this battle. You have given the enslaved species of the galaxy hope. And hope is the most dangerous weapon of all. The transmission ended, leaving the war room in stunned silence. Then, slowly, other transmissions began to arrive. From the Viridian Council. From the Nashian Collective. From the Korthian Assembly. From a dozen species that humanity had never known existed. They were not offering military aid. They could not. The Zythrak would destroy them if they intervened directly. But they were offering something else, information. Shield frequencies. Weapon specifications. Supply routes. The knowledge of species that had been enslaved by the Zythrak for centuries, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to fight back. War Master Krell received his own transmissions. Reports of unrest in the slave worlds. Small rebellions. Sabotage. The enslaved species were not attacking directly. They were not strong enough. But they were no longer cooperating. They were no longer afraid. And on the eternal darkness, surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet, Krell finally understood what was happening. He was not just fighting humanity. He was fighting an idea. The idea that the strong could be challenged. The idea that slavery could end. The idea that 5,000 years of Zythrak dominance was not inevitable or eternal. He had come to conquer a primitive species. Instead, he had started a revolution. Thax approached him one final time. War Master, we have lost 14 ships. Our ground forces are bogged down in endless urban warfare. The other species are watching. If we continue this fight and lose, the entire empire will collapse. Every slave world will rise against us. Krell sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke. Open a channel to the human commander. General Chen's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired but unbroken. Behind him, Chen could see human soldiers treating wounded, human engineers repairing equipment, human civilians bringing food and water to fighters. They had lost so much. They were still fighting. General Chen, Krell said slowly, I am War Master Krell of the Zythrak Empire. I am authorized by the High Command to propose a cessation of hostilities. Chen raised an eyebrow. You want to negotiate? I want to survive, Krell replied honestly. You cannot defeat us militarily. But we cannot conquer you without destroying everything that makes conquest worthwhile. We are at what your species calls a stalemate. What are your terms? Chen asked. Krell felt something he had never felt before. Humility. We will withdraw from your system. We will recognize your sovereignty. In exchange, you will not pursue us. You will not spread your methods of resistance to other species. You will allow the Zythrak Empire to maintain its current borders. Chen laughed. It was not a happy sound. You invade our world, kill our people, and now you want us to help you keep your slaves? No. Here are my terms. You will withdraw immediately. You will free every enslaved species in your territory. You will never threaten humanity or our allies again. And in exchange, we will not hunt you to extinction. The war room was silent. Every leader stared at Chen in shock. He had just rejected a peace treaty and demanded the collapse of an empire that had ruled for 5 millennia. Krell stared at the human general. "You are insane." Chen smiled. "We are human. Same thing. You have 12 hours to decide. After that, we start using the weapons we have been holding back." It was a bluff. Humanity had no secret weapons left. They had used everything they had. But Krell did not know that. And after 3 days of fighting humans, he was willing to believe they were capable of anything. The transmission ended. Krell sat in his command throne, considering his options. He could fight on. He could probably win, eventually. But it would cost him most of his fleet, and the other species would see his weakness. Or he could accept the human terms. Dismantle the empire his species had built over 5,000 years. Become just another species among many. "War Master," Thak said quietly, "what do we do?" Krell made his decision. He did what no Zythrak War Master had ever done in recorded history. He retreated. 3 months later, the Treaty of Terra was signed on a neutral space station orbiting Jupiter. The Zythrak agreed to free their enslaved species over a 10-year period. Humanity agreed not to wage offensive war against them. Other species, emboldened by humanity's example, formed the Galactic Cooperation Council, a defensive alliance designed to prevent any single species from dominating the galaxy again. Jax Rivera attended the signing ceremony. He had survived the battle, though Sarah Kim had not. Her fighter had been destroyed on the second day, covering his retreat. He wore her pilot wings on his uniform and thought about her every time he looked at the stars. Dr. Amara Okonkwo was there too, having survived the assault on her facility. She had destroyed the Prometheus Protocol, every sample and every record, ensuring that biological warfare would remain a threat rather than a reality. Captain Elena Rodriguez brought her daughter Maria, who insisted on wearing her mother's old military jacket. The girl looked at the assembled alien species with curiosity rather than fear. She was part of the first generation of humans to grow up knowing they were not alone in the universe, and they did not need to be afraid. General Marcus Chen stood before the assembled delegates and spoke words that would be remembered for centuries. 3 months ago, humanity learned we were not alone. We learned that the universe was far more dangerous than we imagined. We learned that there were species out there who saw us as nothing more than resources to be exploited. But we also learned something else. We learned that strength is not about size or technology. Strength is about will. The will to protect what we love. The will to stand when others kneel. The will to fight when defeat seems certain. We taught the galaxy that lesson in blood and fire. Now let us teach them a better lesson. Let us show them what cooperation can achieve. Let us build a future where strength is measured not by how many we conquer, but by how many we lift up. The chamber erupted in applause. Not from humans, but from dozens of species who had been freed from slavery, who had been given hope when hope seemed impossible. War Master Krell was there too, representing the Zythrak. He had been stripped of his rank and his honor, reduced to a simple diplomat. But he was alive, and his species survived. That was more than he had expected 3 months ago. He approached General Chen after the ceremony. The human general was smaller than Krell, weaker, fragile in ways that Zythrak could never be. Yet Krell found himself bowing his head in respect. "You fought well," Krell said. "Your species is worthy of respect." Chen smiled tiredly. "We fought desperately. There is a difference." "Perhaps." Krell paused. "I have spent 600 years believing that strength was all that mattered. That the powerful had the right to rule the weak. Your species taught me I was wrong. I do not know if I should thank you or hate you for that lesson." "Be grateful," Chen replied. "The universe is better when we learn from each other rather than destroy each other." Krell considered this. Then he extended one of his 4-clawed hands. In Zythrak culture, it was a gesture of truce, of acknowledgement that the battle was over. Chen took the hand, careful of the sharp talons, and shook it. 5 years later, Earth had become the unofficial capital of the Galactic Cooperation Council. The small blue planet that nobody had known about was now the heart of a new galactic order. Former enemies worked together. Former slaves built their own civilizations. The Zythrak, humbled but not broken, learned to be partners rather than conquerors. Admiral Elena Rodriguez, promoted for her role in the war, stood on the observation deck of the new space station humanity had built in cooperation with a dozen other species. Her daughter Maria was a cadet now, training to be a diplomat rather than a soldier. The galaxy needed builders more than fighters. Jax Rivera commanded a mixed-species squadron, teaching young pilots from across the galaxy the importance of creativity, courage, and working together. He wore Sarah's wings every day and told her story to anyone who would listen. She had died so that others could live, and her sacrifice had mattered. Dr. Amara Okonkwo led a research team that included Zythrak, Viridian, and human scientists, working on technologies that would benefit everyone. She had destroyed one weapon but helped create 1,000 tools of peace. She considered it a fair trade. General Marcus Chen had retired, returning to Geneva to write a history of the war. He wanted future generations to remember not just the victory, but the cost. 8 million humans had died in 3 days of fighting. Entire cities had been destroyed. But Earth had survived, and humanity had proven something important. They had proven that the universe belonged to those who refused to surrender, to those who fought not just for themselves but for each other, to those who believed that tomorrow could be better than today. The galaxy's most feared species had found their rival in humanity. But more than that, they had found their conscience. And the universe would never be the same.